Now, an interesting question is, why did the average Wehrmacht soldier fight till the very end of 1945? Why didn't they just give up, for instance, in 1944 as the Allies assumed? Especially considering that in 1944 and 1945, 2/3 of all losses occurred. So, and there were points before, for instance, winter 1941, 1942, the Red Army counteroffensive, or Stalingrad in winter 1942, 1943, or especially summer 1944, the invasion in Normandy and the destruction of Army Group Center on the Eastern Front, that basically showed the war was lost, or was likely to be lost. I mean, 1941, 1942, one could say, okay, we can deal with this, but later on it gets more and more. So now I read up a bit on this, and one author noted 4 factors. He noted political indoctrination, the military justice system, training, and comradeship or brotherhood in arms, whatever you want to call it. I think you know what I mean. So now the first one, let's look at political indoctrination. Of course, everyone thinks about Nazi and Nazi propaganda, but actually from what I read, this had a limited effect. For instance, the lectures on political information, the soldiers were basically, yeah, what should we do with this? They couldn't really relate to this. And also political officers were only introduced in late war and also to a very limited numbers and capacities. So not too much happened here. Of course, if we look at the broader indoctrination or society values, which would also be similar to Germany, let's say in World War I to a certain degree, or even nowadays, there was of course the whole experience they faced. If you look at World War I, the German army was defeated and fought 4 years on the Western Front and bled itself dry against France, which was basically the arch enemy at this point. And in summer 1940, it just took 6 weeks to conquer France and defeat it completely. And also conquer Belgium, Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands. So to a certain degree, this all gave everything a bit more of another understanding or feeling how they would approach this. So this, of course, then combined with the Nazi propaganda, gave everything a different spin or more substantial or more substance to it. So, and this also got in hand with the Hitler myth. Now, what is very interesting is usually that people distinguished between Hitler and the party. So everything bad was usually blamed on the party, and the good thing was attached to Hitler, which has several reasons. For once, he was the guy at the top, and during peacetime, he had quite many successes, and also some successes which were not caused by him. For instance, the economy revived due to various other reasons. Not just because the Nazis came into power, but well, from the outside, and usually it's attributed to one person. And also people projected their hopes on Hitler to a certain degree as well. So it's easier to see one person as the guy bringing the salvation than, let's say, some abstract like the party. And for instance, there were soldiers, there were questions, and they said, well, if we would have clearly lost, Hitler would have stopped it by now. There must be something. He must still have a plan, or back then he also managed to do this with the Sudeten crisis and some other issues. He fixed that. He probably will do it again. And of course, hope is sometimes the last thing you have left. So now the next point is the military justice system. There's a clear distinction between World War II and World War I. The justice system was restructured because to a certain degree to the Deutsche, which was the legend and myth that the German army was undefeated in World War I and just that the population and everything else stabbed them in the back. But about more this in another video. And they had more stricter laws, higher punishments, and the time of the trials was shortened. And it was also way more executed. For instance, around 150 soldiers were trialed and found guilty in World War I, which would have led to their execution, but only around 50 of them were executed in the end. Whereas in World War II, till the end of 1944, more than 9,700 were executed. Until the end of the war, it's estimated 15 to 20,000. We only have the certain number till December 1944. As you can see, the number is a staggering difference. This, of course, was less of a motivation, but more of a negative motivation. This kept the soldiers in line. Another factor is, of course, training. Now, training from a civilian to a soldier provides many aspects, and probably one of the most important is not how to deal with weapons, but how to deal with stress, how to deal with really hard, exhausting, desperate situations. I experienced boot camp myself, and I saw quite a lot of very exhausted people, and I was exhausted myself in many ways. For instance, on the mental side and also on the physical side. And what you learn in boot camp is basically you can still carry on, and sometimes you can still do more than you did before you were in your best shape ever. So you realize that your mind is sometimes playing tricks on you, that it tells you, yeah, you can't do this, whereas you're just at 10 or 20% of your capacity. So you could say basically in boot camp you learn what you can do and also develop a certain amount of grit and stoicness, one could say. And originally the Wehrmacht had conscription in 1935, and it was for 1 year, and then it was extended to 2 years of training. Of course, once the war started, training was cut short, but it was still quite substantial, and you just need a few weeks for boot camp to experience this and provide this certain change in mind. And another aspect is the training usually was done in the same unit or with the same people then that the units were sent to the front, which brings us to the fourth point, to the comradeship or brotherhood, whatever you want to call it, Kameradschaft, Kampfgemeinschaft, the community of combat. And this was, or many people consider this as one of the most important aspects. For instance, there was one soldier who lost his wife and 3 children on a ship that was sunk. And he said, well, I can't let my comrades down. I need to go on. So it's about not letting the people you fight with down. And Sebastian Junger, who is a US war correspondent nowadays, and he did a talk basically on TED why soldiers miss war. And he noticed, or his observation, I'm not sure if it's backed up by science, as far as I know not, is that the bond they develop, the trust, because you need to rely on each other in the field, is way stronger than everything you can experience in civilian life usually. So this is the reason why so many soldiers usually go back into combat. This is his assumption. I think there are other factors as well there, but this is one of the main examples, and it also fits in with the 4 factors of this author. Of course, there's a caveat to this. This requires that a certain amount of time is there to integrate new replacements into a unit, or that the loss ratio is not too high, because else the comradeship can't really develop. This is to a certain degree also, I think, brought up in Band of Brothers with the replacements, that they have quite a problem with them. And usually there's some truth to this. I mean, of course, I know it's to a certain degree based on facts, but you can see it everywhere in this regard. So the comradeship is brought up quite often in many cases, and I think it was quite important. Why on a small scale the average soldier didn't lose fighting spirit or carried on. Now some additional points. First off, the fighting spirit of the Wehrmacht changed over the course of the war. It went up and it went down again, but then it went up again. For instance, after Stalingrad or during Stalingrad, it was rather low, but then it recovered and there was again more fierceness in the interviewed POWs, for instance, or in the letters back home. And one very interesting aspect I discovered was that an interrogation report, or I think it was a general report about many soldiers from 1943 from the Western Allies, they noted that the German units were really combat effective and really fierce and tenacious fighters, but they realized that their motivations, their individual motivations, were basically absolutely catastrophic because they didn't care about the war anymore. They didn't care about the war, they didn't care about politics, they just said, okay, let's let it be. And it was noted that they took a special pride in just doing their job, even though the war in their minds was lost, or they didn't care at all about it anymore. So this was rather interesting to read, that they like these stoic people who just want to do their job or just want to do their duty and let be gone it. Yeah. And then there's of course the other factor, for the fear of what will happen after the war. There are two components to this. First off, the Treaty of Versailles was still in the mind of most people. So Germany was humiliated, it lost a lot of territory, the army was downsized and everything. And what would happen now? Because the war was clearly more intense and way stronger, and German cities were bombed and everything else. So what would happen? And especially the Soviet Union was feared extremely. There was this proverb, Sieg oder Sibirien, victory or Siberia. And we know from the Eastern Front that the likelihood of German surrendering was way lower than on the Western Front, because they knew they would face dire consequences if they surrendered there. And there was another aspect, of course, that a large part of the soldiers knew to a certain degree, sometimes in vague terms, sometimes in details, about the atrocities, war crimes and the Holocaust. So they also knew, okay, what would happen, because there were certain crimes committed in our area we occupied or something else. So there was also this other proverb, enjoy the war because the peace will be even worse. And this was all there. There was quite many factors. As you can see, also this fear, because I don't know, the one author didn't notice this factor. But in short, one can say there's no easy answer, because it's a quite complex problem. And probably each soldier had individual motives, and they probably to a certain degree get mixed up, especially if you later on look at the officers. And there's a clear distinction between people that had a family and people that didn't have a family in the motivations. So I hope this gave you some insights. As always, sources are in the description. And if you want to know why the nationalist Chinese armies had Panzerkampfwagen, check out this video. Or if you want to have a more complicated view on Erwin Rommel or the Desert Fox, check out this video. Thank you for watching and see you next time.